I'm Jason Little, and this is 10 minutes off the top of my head. We're going to be talking about Nimrod in this video. We started to talk about him in the last video. He's the great-grandfather of them, the great-grandfather of they. He's the guy that pretty much began to solidify it in our era. When I say our era, I mean after the flood. So post-Diluvian era. You have antediluvian, which is before the flood, post-diluvian, which is after the flood. So these guys begin to spread out all over the world because their language has been confounded. Nimrod stays there in Shinar, in Babel, and the Babylonian Empire begins to rise, the Sumerians. And these guys, let me get to this real quick, because now the language is confounded. So now his name is Nimrod in the Bible, and that would be, I don't know. I should have looked it up, but you can look it up on Blue Letter Bible. I believe that will be the Hebrew way to say his name, Nimrod. But the others began to call him by different names because their speech was different. If they were around, the Greek-speaking people called him Apollo. The Egyptian-speaking people called him Osiris. You get where I'm coming from? The Latin-speaking people called him Orion. And so we have this guy. The Sumerian people called him Gilgamesh. We've got this guy who's one person, but has all these different iterations, if you will, of one man. And all of these people are venerated as gods. Osiris, venerated as a god. Apollo, he's the sun god of the Greeks. Orion, a god. Gilgamesh, he was only 2/3 God. He's 1/3 man, 2/3 God. But you think about these things, and you've got the basis for all of the false gods that came afterwards. Now they were already setting up images and worshiping things at the time of Nimrod, but then you have Nimrod who kind of solidifies everything and gets everybody together, and they begin to worship him. And they're leaving, and they're telling the stories to their kids and their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and so on, about this great tower that was built and this man that was able to do it. And he wasn't really a man, he was a god. He was going to go and assault heaven. So this is what's going on. You got to understand, this is them, this system that Satan himself is setting up and overseeing. He's the creator of it all. And Nimrod he's like the founder of the feast, man. Satan gave him the plans, and he began to carry it out. And so we see this begin to unfold throughout history. And we see the false god worship going on, and all the gods of the Canaanites and the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians. They all correspond to one another. Now, how can that be? They all correspond to one another. It's very interesting that they do all correspond to one another. The gods have the same characteristics throughout the different cultures. Why is that? Well, it's because they're all probably, most likely, had been real people that existed and that did things that were notable and later on got turned into gods, starting with Nimrod. Nimrod and then his wife Semiramis, who was also his mother and his half-sister. Yeah, things get a little complicated when there's only 8 people left on the earth to repopulate the earth. So Semiramis was his mother, his half-sister, and his wife. And then she later married his son, Tammuz, after Nimrod died, after she had him killed. Well, there's different stories about that. There's another story that says that Nimrod's head was cut off by Esau. And that when Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, he was running from the Sumerians who were coming to kill him for cutting off the head of Nimrod. So you see, all this stuff gets complicated and convoluted, and it gets lost in history and lost in time. And even right now, and I'm going to give you an example of that, because right now we can look at things that have happened in our recent past, and I mean our recent past, and they're very confusing, and they get very distorted very quickly. For instance, the Oklahoma City bombing that happened, who was the guy that did that? Who carried that out? Timothy McVeigh. When did it happen? Anybody? Raise your hand if you know. I want to say it was 1993. I'm going off the top of my head now. I don't have notes in front of me. But I want to say it was 1993 or 94. It was back in there. Okay? Why did he do it? Do you remember why he did it? He did it in retaliation, allegedly, for what had happened in Waco under Bill Clinton at the Koresh compound when the United States government tore down the buildings and shot CS gas in and then set it on fire. Or was it David Koresh and his followers that set it on fire? Or, you see what I'm saying? Things get messed up in the past. You can even look at 9/11 and all the stories that come out of 9/11 and the different things that happened on September the 11th, 2001. There's all kinds of different conflicting stories that have come out about it. And we live in an age where everything is laid open. It's on camera. We can watch it over and over again, but there's all kinds of different stories. It wasn't terrorists that did it. It was the Bush administration that did it. It wasn't the Bush administration that did it. It was the globalists that did it. It wasn't the globalists that did it. It was the Rockefellers that did it. The Jews did it. The terrorists did it. Who did it? I don't know. Do you know? Can you tell me for sure? You can tell me what you were told, but you can't tell me for sure because you don't know. And if you go back and look at the 9/11 Commission, that thing was a unholy mess. And it was completely ineffective, period. But that's a whole other different series of videos, and I'm not getting into the 9/11 truth movement at all. I've never gotten into it. I'm not arguing that, so please don't misunderstand me, but it serves to prove a point about cognitive dissonance, again, because immediately you have accepted, and I have accepted exactly what they told us. They told us what to believe. They told us what was happening, and we just accept it because we don't know any better. Because we can't know any better. Because we've been programmed to accept it. Because we've been programmed to turn to ABC, CBS, and NBC, CNN, and Fox News to get our news, to get what's going on. Headline news, MSNBC, all that stuff. They tell us what to think. They tell us what to believe. They tell us what happened. But is that what's really happening? Is that what we should really think? I heard a story yesterday about a kid who brought some pills to school, some diabetic medicine, and he was passing it out to his friends in kindergarten, and they all were taking it, and they all got sick. Now, I'm telling you, I heard that 6-8 months ago, the same exact story. But I don't remember, to be honest with you. Is it the Mandela effect? I don't think so, because I think you know by now, I believe the Mandela effect is a psyop. But I believe wholeheartedly that they are programming us. Who are they? Well, they started with Adam and Eve. They continued through Cain. They continued through Cush. They continued through Nimrod. They continued through, well, even Ham. Ham, Cush, Nimrod. They are the ones that are in control under the supervision of the master they, Satan. And if you look down through history and you begin to see some things happening and people rising to the top and people beginning to take preeminence over others and people beginning to subject others to their will, you see it in Egypt with the pharaohs. You see it in the Greek empires. You know that Greece wasn't always a united nation. There was all these different little city-states and empires all around Greece. And so they began to, once they solidified under Philip the Macedonian and then later Alexander the Great, hundreds of years after the Trojan War, we see Greece solidify as an empire and then quickly be destroyed as an empire. But, honestly, I think you know by now I could do 3 hours. I really could. Wouldn't be a problem. I could probably do 10. But these things get so convoluted and they get so confusing and there's so much information and there's so many details that we tend to lose sight of the fact that there's absolutely a they, and they are trying to subject you to their will. Now, who are they? Again, Adam and Eve, Cain, Ham, Cush, Nimrod. We begin to see it. The pharaohs of Egypt, the Caesars of Rome, all the emperors of the world, they're all part of the same world system that the Bible tells us that we should not love. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. Is it talking about plants and trees and flowers and bugs and animals and birds and fish? No, it's not talking about that, but it's talking about the world system. And we have to be aware that there's a world system out there that doesn't care about you, that's led by Satan himself. He's the god of this world as described by the Apostle Paul in the book of Second Corinthians. I almost said Second Chronicles. Second Corinthians. And we have to understand that they have an agenda. And that agenda is to prevent you and me from having a relationship with God. And it's been carried out through the ages, and sometimes it gets suppressed, their agenda. They get themselves into trouble, and they find themselves in difficult times and situations. But they always redouble their efforts, and they always come after us harder. And it's happening right up to now at this very moment, and they're putting on such a push at this moment that I've since I've been alive, I've never seen anything like it. Looking back in history, I don't think that I've seen anything like it before. But we are in a battle, and it's not a physical battle. It's not a hot war with guns and bullets and bombs. It's a battle for your heart. It's a battle for your mind. It's a battle for your soul. Now, we know that Satan was trying to prevent and destroy the Messiah before the Messiah was ever born. And we'll get into that on the next video. God bless you. See you on the next video.